What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? I'm trying to see if this thing is going to work today. And if it works today, then that means it's going to work in the future. So what's going on? I need to know if you can hear me. I'm just doing a system check for real, but I'm going to hang around a little bit. This is a live mic check. This is a live mic check just to see if you can hear me. That's not the right one. So it would be interesting to see if anybody joins, see if there's any notifications being sent off. But I got to know whether or not this thing is being broadcast or not. I got to find it. There we go. Live streaming, proper perspective, system check, news reports. So now I know it's being broadcast. News report. So now I know it's being broadcast. News report. So now I know. And it does show a little bit. 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 And I can even see. And I can even see. Okay, this is interesting. And I can even see. Okay, this is interesting. Okay, this is interesting. If anybody does happen to come along and join this chat, what's going on with you? How you doing? If anybody does happen to come along and join this chat, now that I know that the mic is live, the mic is hot, now that I know I can be heard, now that I know it's being somewhat clearly shown and displayed, what I need to do another check. I don't know where my other phone is. That's what I was supposed to do. But what's going on, everybody? This is Shabazz with the proper perspective. If this is the first time you're tuning in, maybe you'll hear something that you like. Hit the like button, share, subscribe. I'm just up here, really, for the most part, I'm here to check my system. I'm trying to see if everything is working. It shows that there's 24 people. So if that is a true and accurate showing, then please somebody hit the like button or say something in the comment section so I can see that you really are here. Okay, 701. I do see a comment. Tyler Lou says hello. What's up with you? What's good, Tyler? So I can at least get a little bit of feedback. Okay. And it's showing up on my screen, so that is also an extra positive. I am normally when I do my lives, well, I do a couple of different types of lives, but usually when I'm on my phone, which is what I'm on right now, I'm usually doing Shabazz around town, and I'm showing you some good eats. So if you like to check out channels that showcase food, uh, again, like, share, subscribe, hit those buttons so that you see the next time I am coming to you live from whatever restaurant I happen to choose here in the Richmond, Virginia area. That's one of the things that I do on this channel. The other thing I do on this channel is I deal with a lot of controversial, heavy political topics, and I try to do deep dives into some stuff. So that's hence the name or hence the title of tonight's live stream. I'm doing a system check because I'm using some new software, and I'm really just trying to see how it works, what it looks like on mobile, what it looks like on PCs, so I can know exactly, what I'm doing. If you're interested, then you yourself can check out Prism Live Studio. It's the first time I'm using it, so we'll see what it looks like, how it does, and what kind of responsiveness it has. I see I got 4 people on here, 3 people on here, so okay, that's cool. I'm really trying to see if YouTube is actually sending off the notifications, if they're doing their marketing thing that they say they do. Um, I do have one huge topic that I'm interested in talking about, but I'd rather wait to see if there's going to be any people that come through and stick around to have a conversation about it. I'd rather hear some other people's opinions before I jump in on that. So let me see. Now I cannot read this particular language. It may be Hebrew, but this person says, "Who is your favorite UFC fighter?" Well, I will tell you this. I am somewhat of a fan of. I'm more of a fan of boxing. I started recently getting into UFC, but I don't know enough about UFC to say I have a favorite fighter. I've only seen a couple of fights, so I wish I knew more. As the days go by, hopefully, you know, I will gain some more knowledge about that. Who is yours? I wish I could say your name. I wish I could read the language so I could just give you a shout out or whatever, but I can't do that. So, but if you feel free to drop that, and we will see what's going on. Now, Gabriel Renner says you put the planet in Planet Fitness. Whatever that means, I appreciate it. Talib777 says, do you know who Tehuti is? I know who Tehuti is as far as ancient Egyptian um, Kemetic teachings, principles, etc. is. I know there are a couple of brothers in the so-called Afrocentric or conscious community online that have Tehuti in their name. So yes, I do know who Tahuti is. Which one are you talking about? Maybe we could build on that. Now, the Hebrew named person, whatever, says, why do black people do live streams and just talking for themselves for an hour? I don't know. Why do Hebrew named people get online and just randomly rant in black people's chat rooms? I'm clearly responding to you, Hebrew um, named person, and don't respond to the comment section. I'm responding to your comment section. Now, I may be responding more verbally than I am um, in writing. Okay, so you literally want somebody to type something. If it's that much of a problem, you you can leave. So, as I said, if you were really open to having a conversation, Hebrew named individual, then if you were paying attention, you would have said that I primarily got on here because I'm testing out my software. And I said, if people join, then I would perhaps go further in my discussion about the diaspora wars, in my discussion about some news reports that I have been looking into. So the Hebrew name person says, you are the first one that answered me. Good, good. Wish you lack. Okay, wish me lack. That could be a play on words, or maybe you just misspelled it. But I wish you whatever. I return to you the same spirit. If it's good spirit, then good for you. If it's bad spirit, then may you meet your match. Now, so Talib says, so are Black Americans indigenous to America or not? Now, great question. I would say, in all absolute terms, I would say absolutely not. I do not think, I'm not going to say believe, I do not think, I do not have any knowledge that is verifiable fact that Black Americans are indigenous to America. I am fully aware of the conversation that is being had, especially online. I am fully aware that there are some Native American tribes who owned enslaved Africans and kicked them off of the Dawes rolls. And the Muscogee Nation just lost in court their bid to continue keeping their descendants of ex-slaves off their rolls. So those quote unquote freedmen have now been restored to the Dawes rolls of the Muscogee Nation. Shout out to them, salute to them, congratulations to them. But that don't make Black Americans indigenous to America. Those freedmen are still descendants of people who were brought here on the slave boats, whether you like it or not. That's my take. If you feel differently, say something in the chat, and we'll keep it going. Now, the Hebrew name person, I wish you would at least just type your name into the chat in English so I could say your name instead of this little whatever, whatever. But who is your favorite boxer? My all-time favorite boxer, I gotta say, is Muhammad Ali. Thank you, Erez. And if I'm not saying that correctly, I do apologize. But my all-time favorite boxer is Muhammad Ali. My number two all-time favorite boxer would be uh, Mike Tyson. I don't really have a current favorite boxer. I just love to see a real good fight. And Erez says his is Shannon the Cannon Briggs. Hmm. Now, I can't say that I've heard that name. Some of the boxers I have seen, some of the fights that I've seen, I really do have a respect for them. I just haven't been so glued in, so locked in as to remember their names. But like for instance, whoever the brother name is, he kind of like went viral for a hot second because he was giving a commentary about the status of Black Americans and the hell that we go through, and he said to this day, and it sort of went viral because he said he was still going on. Like I said, I'm horrible with names, but I like that brother. Let me see now. So now I would have to check out Shannon the Cannon Briggs. Well, I'll give my brother a holler because he is locked in on boxing, and so he'll be able to tell me um, some good stuff. Now Talib 7777 says, "Are you aware that the book Roots was not Alex Haley, but actually written by a white man?" Yes, I am fully aware that the book Roots was not 100% written by Alex Haley. I am fully aware that he was not 100% written by Alex Haley. I'm glad that you brought the question up. I've I have been aware of the book for quite a while. I have been aware of the so-called controversy. I don't really think it's a controversy. I don't think it's much of a controversy. I think that there are some twisted individuals who have a twisted goal in creating controversy where there isn't. So I'm not necessarily sure where your I'm not necessarily sure your angle or where you're asking the question, but most people who bring it up, especially when they ask the question about the white man that wrote it, are trying to imply that we're not really African and that whole book is fake because it wasn't written by him. And I'm just like, first and foremost, from what I am aware of, all of the research that I did about Alex Haley and that book, the notes that he quote unquote stole was real research on a real African from the Gambia. So if the white man was putting together a book and the white man actually found a so-called Kunta Kinte, whether that be his name or not, and the white man found an actual tribe that this African came from, and it was in the Gambia, because that's what I was aware of. I was made aware when I did the research that Alex Haley, to some extent, stole the man's research And even stole is a very strong word. But he stole, he took, he borrowed, he used the man's research. He didn't make it up out of thin air. He didn't create it from his imagination. It was real, legit research that he borrowed or took creative license from to put in his own book. So if the research is real, but the author is not, hey, the information is legit. Why have we went from colored to Negro to African Americans to black? Because we hate ourselves, because we cannot deal with the truth and the facts, because we don't want to look in the mirror and face the fact that we are African, because we've been flooded with so much information about how bad Africa is. All we want to do is just be detached from all of that ugly history. We have a long standing track record of a certain percentage of the black community running like Jackie Joyner Kersey away from our true, authentic African selves. And we have a certain percentage of the black community fully embracing it. The two will never agree. Just like integrationists, assimilationists, civil rights generation black Americans will never agree with pro-black radical revolutionary separatists. The two will simply never agree. But just because there has been this identity crisis doesn't mean we're not African. We were called colored because that's what white folks called us. We were called Negro because that's what white folks called us. We called ourselves African Americans as far back as the 1700s. And it was just more recently under Jesse Jackson where it became popular. But you can look it up. The documentation is there. We were claiming Africa ever since we got off the boats. If you read any of the quote unquote, the slave narratives, it's all throughout the slave narratives where the captives came from. There's no slave narrative where the person says, you know something, really, I'm a Cherokee. No, they all claimed the areas from Africa that they came from. Shout out to Mustafa. Mustafa said hi. Shout out to okay, Erez is still here. He says actually right. Talib 77 says why can't it be both? I'm not saying that it can't be both. He says so you see Africa part of your current identity. Yes, I do see Africa as part of my current identity. I see Africa as my entire heritage. And that doesn't mean that I don't deny my citizenship in the country of my birth, but I also don't deny my DNA. There is no American DNA. The DNA is black, the DNA is African. Let's see. So why can't it be both? I'm not going to say that it can't be both for some people. I would say, for instance, I got people in my family, and I just saw this on another channel. So let's say I as a black man, as an African American, even if you want to say I as an ADOS or FBA. So let's just put all that out there. Let's say I marry a full-blooded, 100% verified Cherokee, red man, red-skinned individual, a woman who is beyond all shadow of a doubt Pocahontas-like, based on all of the, whether it's real or not, based on all of that. And we have children. Our children are both. Our children are African American and Native American. That's how I see, yeah, you could be both. You could actually be both. I have people in my family who, as African Americans, married Native Americans. married a Native American who was born on a reservation, grew up on a reservation, has a, I don't know the name of the tribe, but let's say it was Choctaw, let's say it was Chickahominy, or let's say it was Yamasee, whatever. But they grew up entirely in that culture. They have that language, and if they took a DNA test, it would come up with one of those. Do I think Fijians call themselves Africans? I think Fijians call themselves Fijians. What does that have to do with it? Let's see. Irez says it's very simple. The USA in immigration nation from the beginning. It was European fellas that looked for better opportunities beyond the sea. New York called after a town in England. Let's see. Like I said, I I'm waiting for Talib 777 to give me a response about the Fijians. I don't know a whole lot about Fijians, but I don't necessarily know why, whether Fijians call themselves Africans has anything to do with us over here. Are Fijians known to have gotten to Fiji through some type of slave trade? Are you even considering Fijians part of the so-called Negroid or African stock? Because we all have Negroid features, but of different nations. Okay, but there's the thing. Nation. So what do you mean by nation? Because what I mean by nation, we may never agree on the term itself. Because okay, if Fijians have Negroid features, which Negroid features do they have? Do they have the stereotype phenotypically big nose, big lip, kinky hair, which I don't even have because I cut my hair off? Do they have all three of them or just one or two? For you or what you're saying? Robert Black, I'm from Africa, and I'd like to know, why does it all matter? You are American, and other than the color of your skin, you are definitely not African. Well, Robert Black, you have a right to your opinion. You, just like I say, if I'm not going to allow ADOS community, if I'm not going to allow FBA community to uh, give me a label, I'm not going to allow a brother that was born on the continent to give me a label either. So you are free to have your opinion. I definitely am an African, but I don't have to prove myself to you. You can feel like I'm not an African. If I had to say, if I felt like, oh, I need a quote from somebody to verify my Africanity, then I would just quote Malcolm X. I would just quote Kwame Nkrumah and say, have a good day. Which one of your family members is from Africa? The one that was thrown on a boat and brought over here. And since I did a little bit of the genealogy research, and since I did a little bit of the DNA research, I know ethnicity, I know region. That's all I need to know. Again, I don't have to prove it to you anymore then an FBA has to prove to me, or a pretendian has to prove to me that they're Native American. Now, you can say, like the Native American or the Black Natives, whatever they're calling themselves, I call them pretendians. It's not like they're going to change their mind because I say, no, you ain't. It's not like I'm going to change my mind because you say, no, you ain't. Let's see. Talib says, it doesn't matter, but we have to have identity. African American, Talib says, isn't an African American an American citizen from Africa? Again, you're mixing apples and oranges. So let me take each statement one at a time. You say it doesn't matter, but we have to have an identity. Okay. To some extent, I would agree we do have to have an identity. I don't think I agree with the "it doesn't matter" part, but that's me nitpicking. Now, do we have to have an identity? Yeah, everybody has to have an identity. Um, Kujichagulia, part of the Nguzo Saba, says that we all have a right to self-identify. So under that rubric, I'm not going to I'm not gonna challenge. Well, challenge is a bad word. If a person wants to identify as an FBA or an ADOS, they have that right. I'm not going to identify that way. Um, I'm going to identify as an African, a descendant of enslaved Africans. And yes, now, but that's my identity. That's my social identity. That's my cultural identity. Might say that's my political identity. That's not my global, international citizenship identity. I recognize that I am an American citizen. I also recognize that I live in the Western Hemisphere, but we don't want to talk about that. That's the inconvenient label. I recognize that I live on a continent that has Canada, North America, Canada, the United States of America, and Mexico. But we don't want to claim that part of our identity. We just want to stick to the hot button ones so that we can have fights about stuff. But I am just as much a North American as a Mexican is. And Mexican is just as much a North American as a Canadian is. It's a real label. It actually exists on the books. It's in the textbooks. It's on the maps. It's an identity. Now let me go back. Let me see. Because a couple of people have said some things. Now, Talib also said, is an African American an American citizen from Africa? Now, again, I'm not necessarily sure where you're going with that, so I'm going to try to leave that one alone. Maybe if you reword it, I'll come back to it. But JM says, is nation of origin more important than character when evaluating a person? Is nation of origin more important than character when evaluating a person? Clearly not, or at least not necessarily, and not at all times. It should be that a person's character is way more important than their nation of origin. But that's when you're evaluating a person, which means you're having an individual one-on-one relationship. And that ain't what we talking about. JM says it's like arguing over a sports team. It might be. I don't necessarily agree, but I can understand why you would frame it that way. But even in arguing over a sports team, don't people do it all the time? It happens all the time. And whatever side, whichever team, one group of people picks, they never gonna cross the line and jump and say, okay, y'all better. So Erez says, Robert, you need to understand that for people in America, it's a busy topic. It really is a busy topic. It's a hot button issue. I honestly, to some extent, I wish it wasn't as hot button of an issue in America as it is. But because of the American dilemma, because of the white supremacist, racist culture and system of America, it's always going to be a hot button issue. Let's see. Talib says an African American would be a foreigner in America, right? Again, I do believe I enjoy the back and forth. I'm still not necessarily understanding the questions. I see you're trying to get at something, and I'm trying to give you the space to get there before I answer. At this point, I'm not even understanding the question. Now, Zona PFZ says, Cuéntame otra vez más historia. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're saying. So Talib says, okay, I agree. Hopefully that was with something I said, but if not, okay, that's cool. Erez says, not a foreigner, but part of an ethnic group. Okay, not a foreigner, but part of an ethnic group. I think that's about the African American, uh, Talib's question about an African American being a foreigner in America. I might agree if that's what you mean. An African American would be an ethnicity in America, not necessarily a foreigner. Now, if you switch America to Turtle Island and you're going to give prominence to the original name of this geographical territory prior to the 1492 European invasion, then maybe we could talk. Foreigner. Red says, but your roots are arguably shorter. I would agree with that. Are you aware that Basil has more blacks than, oh, Brazil has more blacks than any country in Africa? No, I'm not aware of that. I was aware that Brazil had more, a greater African or enslaved or descendants of enslaved African population than America. I'm hard pressed to believe that there are more quote unquote blacks in Brazil than in any country in Africa. But again, I don't know. I don't know Brazil history and information that like that. That's an interesting thing if that's true. I look it up. Robert Black says a descendant is the operative word you used because again, other than the color of your skin, you are not African, brother, and I mean no disrespect. Robert Black, again, like I said, you are free to have your opinion, but you're not free to convince me to agree. Yes, I'm a descendant. Now, however you choose to define Africa, African, is up to you. I've kind of sort of already stated how I define Africa, African, and under my definition, I'm an African. You do not have to be an African only by birth on the continent. That's my definition. And I mean no disrespect to you either. But I'm not going to agree with you that I'm not African. I've done, and I would say that in the sense that I'm not new to this conversation. I've been knee deep in this conversation for a couple of decades. I understand many of the angles. I understand many of the perspectives. I've looked into them, read them, studied them. I've been taught about them. I've had to teach them. So I understand why many people would say, y'all not African. I get it. But just because I understand your perspective doesn't mean I'm going to agree. I am an African. But I don't need your permission to claim my Africanity. Now, again, if I needed to quote someone, then okay, I've already quoted Malcolm X. I've already quoted Kwame Nkrumah. I'll throw in Marcus Garvey. I'll throw in all kinds of people. I'll throw in Kwame Ture. We are African people, whether people admit it or not, whether people like it or not, that doesn't change the facts. Let's see. Red says, I'm not sure about the Brazil fact. Me neither. Talib says, if someone comes from Nigeria and becomes a U.S. citizen, then he is an African American. In some sense of the word, yes. Most, I can't say most, from what I have seen, from what I have heard, from what I have been told, many of those prefer the term Nigerian American, but that's not no hardcore fact. And what you're talking about, again, you're not speaking to, it's very important when we have these conversations to understand what type of label you're speaking to. You're not speaking to identity so much as what Uncle Sam stamps you as. Now, Uncle Sam has a definition of what an African American is. Now, and that don't necessarily mean it's 100% right because Uncle Sam will change it in a heartbeat. But an African American, just like what does black mean? It depends on what book you're looking at. So there are people that will come in and say, "Well, you ain't black because in the law dictionary, black means dead." Okay, but I don't live in the law dictionary. So there are many different ways to define a term. And None of them are necessarily right. None of them are necessarily wrong. It's whichever one you personally decide this is what I'm running with. I'm going to run with an African American as I see it. And I see an African American as primarily those who descend from the transatlantic slave trade in the United States. Those who unfortunately chose not to separate from white America during Reconstruction. Those who chose not to fall to follow the black revolutionary radicals that said we want our own country. Because had we done that, none of this would be a conversation. Had we done that, we would be the Republic of New Africa, according to the last great stand of the black revolutionaries who were fighting for true freedom and liberation. They wanted to split this country up, take half of the South and rename it the Republic of New Africa. And that would have been us. Then it wouldn't be, well, do you consider yourself, why you call yourself this? Why you call yourself? Because we'd be the New Africans. That was the name that we were shooting for. We are Africans basically, but we have different nationalities. Absolutely. Because there's a quote that I have, and I've been meaning to play it on my channel for a while, but there's a quote from a brother who says this in a very much more eloquent way. But again, a Ghanaian is an African, but a Ghanaian is not a Nigerian, but he's still an African. An Ethiopian is an African, but he's not a Tanzanian. So there are different nationalities, just like there are different ethnicities. We are an African people in the Americas. Our ethnicity is African American. Just like there are populations of black people in Mexico who descend from the transatlantic slave trade. They are Africans in Mexico. There are pockets of black people in Canada, in Nova Scotia, who descend from the transatlantic slave trade. They are an African people. But there were Africans here before the slave trade. It's so funny that you jumping into this because this is exactly what I was just dealing with before I went live. There were Africans here before the slave trade. Yes, this is true. It wasn't a bunch. But there were some who were here before the slave trade. Yes, I don't deny that. There were Africans that came here with the Spaniards, with the conquistadors. Some of them were conquistadors themselves. Some of them were enslaved Africans who were thrown on the boat and forced. You gonna show us how to get over there. So there were Africans over here before the Europeans. They were still Africans. If you believe the West African history, then Mansa Musa's predecessor got on a boat and came over to the West. If you believe in that West African history. So there were Africans here before the slave trade. That don't make them Native Americans. That don't make them indigenous to the Americas. That don't make them the real Indians. That don't make them black Indians. They were Africans who came here before Europeans came. So identity is definitely important, but again, how you label your identity, how you claim your identity. Like I'm not gonna the Olmecs, the original mother culture of the Americas. They came before the Aztecs. They came before what is it? Aztecs. They came before the Mayas. They came before the Incas, and they do look very African. They do look very Negroid. But the jury is out as to whether or not they actually were African. But they definitely have the look. But I got a sense that if you continue this, you're gonna go into some derivative of the story that the Olmecs found their way to travel up through Central America into Mexico and then into the contiguous 48. Is that where you're going with this? And even if they did, like you really need to look at the chronology and the timeline and the timestamp and see whether or not that holds, whether or not that cuts the mustard. So again, now if you are tuning in, if you're just new, if you've been here, if you're still here, you know, I started off as a system check. I wanted to talk about anything and everything, news, diaspora wars, what have you. Please hit the like button. Please comment. Please share. Drop some comments in the chat room. This is Shabazz with the proper perspective. I see I got 3 people still here. Talib has been, you know, I've enjoyed the conversation with Talib. He hasn't been as antagonistic as some of the other people who come with the identity question, and I'm not necessarily sure where Talib stands. What, you know, if you are still here, you know, why don't you tell me what identity label you claim? You've asked very good questions, but you haven't stated your own claim. But like I said, so now the other thing that I was gonna talk about, or that I was considering to talk about, the thing here says 2 more people here, or 2 people left. Now you see this. Let me see if I can get that. It's in my finger. You see this down here, diaspora wars. Who's keeping us divided? How y'all feel about the diaspora wars? Have you heard about the diaspora wars? Are you planning to boycott African businesses on August 1st? That was the other question I was gonna try to, you know, get some conversation in. Um, okay, I got a few people who hit. Okay, 3 people hit the like button. I appreciate that. So let's see. Are y'all gonna anybody boycotting? Let me see. Anyone boycotting African businesses on August 1st? I tell you one thing, me, I'm not boycotting African businesses on August 1st or any other day. Matter of fact, I think just out of spite, I'm gonna make sure that I find myself an African business to patronage. I'm gonna go to an African restaurant. I'm gonna order me some vegetarian egusi with fufu and jollof rice on the side. I'm gonna sip me some palm wine, and just to be Pan African with it, I'm gonna order me a Jamaican ginger beer as well. Um, I don't agree with the diaspora wars. I think the diaspora wars are stupid. I think the diaspora wars are really a psyop. I think it's what people is calling it. People are saying um, it's fake. It's a real beef, but it's being propped up by people who have a vested interest in keeping us divided. Let's see. I've been online for 43 minutes. That's not bad. The time goes by fast. I'm gonna stay online for a little bit longer just to see if anybody else slides through. Like I said, I do appreciate uh, those who have participated in today's little conversation. And if we can get some more people to come in, then I will continue the conversation. And if not, I will at least log off and know that I am very much heard through the software. I am very much uh, peace to you, bro. Be sure to subscribe. A dope combo. See, I'm not all that good with the multis. So if I'm typing something to somebody, then I end up off screen and stuff like that. But yeah, shout out to Talib777 and Arez and the African brother who claims I'm not African, and Zona Piv and JM. Oh, Robert Black. Yeah, that was his name. Ain't that funny? A brother named Black telling me I ain't black. Shout out to Mustafa. Let me see if anybody else, did I miss anybody? I don't think so. Gabriel Renner for coming through. So again, shout out to everybody that came through. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate the conversation and the questions. And be sure to stay tuned, hit the like button, share this if you heard something that you like. If you heard something that you don't like and you feel like you know somebody that would like tear me up in a debate, share this with them too. Let them come over here and see what kind of smoke we can get going. But again, this has been Shabazz with the proper perspective, signing off. Peace.